So now that we've covered the behavioral section, let's look at how they come into play in the different types of animal relationships. Let's start out with symbiosis. Symbiosis is the interaction between two different organisms living in close physical association, typically to the advantage of both. There's a plethora of behaviors within symbiosis: social, communication, curiosity, offensive and or defensive, etc. A symbiotic relationship with two organisms requires some form of cooperation, disregarding parasitism. So let's look into these three relationships that branch from symbiosis. The three types of symbiotic relationships include mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship that is beneficial to both organisms involved. These arrangements usually develop between organisms with widely different living arrangements, like a rhinoceros and an oxpecker bird. These are two types of mutualism: obligate and facilitative. Obligate mutualism is when one organism absolutely can't survive without the other and are forced to rely on each other. An example of this would be a clownfish and sea anemone. The clownfish gains protection from the anemone. Using it as a home since it's immune to its sting, and the anemone gains an increase in the water flow from the clownfish. The fish swims about in the anemone, creating water flow and allowing easier breathing for the anemone. Facultative mutualism is when the organisms rely on each other, but are able to live independently, and is used to make survival easier for both. An example of this would be the rhinoceros and oxpecker bird, as mentioned earlier, as both lead independent survivals but rely on each other to make their lives easier. Moving on to commensalism. Commensalism is a relationship in which one organism is benefited and the other neither benefits nor is harmed from the relationship. A good example of this would be the relationship between cattle and cattle egrets. These birds live near cattle because when the cattle graze, their movements stir up insects. The birds have their insects and the cattle are totally unaffected. This is the one you have to watch out for. Parasitism is a non-mutualistic relationship between two organisms where one species, the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other organism, the host. Oftentimes, it can result in a life-threatening outcome for the host, but some can learn to live with parasitism. Ticks and fleas on, say, deer or even your dog is an example of parasitism. A oppositional relationship is a relationship in which the partaking organisms are opposing, resisting, or combating the other. There are two kinds of oppositional relationships: predation and competition. Competition is an interaction between organisms or species in which both the organisms or species are harmed. Limited supply of at least one resource, such as food, water, or territory, used by both can be a factor. The animals compete against one another, survival of the fittest, if you will. Predation, on the other hand, is a biological interaction where one organism, the predator, of an unlike species uses another organism of another unlike species as a food source, the prey. In ecology, predation is a natural method of population control. You would see predation with a lion and a zebra, predator and prey. So, in the end, animal behavior occurs everywhere. It's the science behind how animals act and behave in context with one another and with their surroundings. Analyzing animal behavior is a very complex skill and uses many different tools and diagrams. The relationship between animals in an area greatly affects the ecosystem and how other organisms interact. Animal behavior changes over time and will continue to change with the discovery of new organisms. The study of animal behavior is complex and interesting and changes the way in which organisms interact with each other and the rest of their environment.
No further videos will be made and the project will not be missed. We would like to thank all of our sources, nature.com, psdschools.org. Our special gratitude goes to Gary who reduced the final to a project. We hope we didn't fail. Any question, comments, concern, Google.